continuamos en el Digital Innovation Day.
We continue on Digital Innovation Day. We're completely live, and this meeting is a space to debate public policies, the most advanced one that we have in the governments today. These challenges are debated with the technologies of information, and we're working. There's no more powerful tool in the internet that telecommunication services and information technologies, and there's not more advanced policy than digital policy. You continue with Digital Innovation Day that is organized by the American General Secretariat by the clock and with the sponsorship of Huawei. Thanks to this company and to the organizer, DPL, of course. The next panel is an extraordinary panel. It's a pleasure to be with friends and colleagues in the digital sector in Latin America. This is probably one of the most important panels in the past few months. And today, we're going to be working about a topic that is very passionate for us, is the opportunity of the digital world from here. I'm going to be introducing to our dear friend and accomplice of Lucas. Lucas, he is the manager of GSA for Latin America. Thank you. We also have an important regulator and respected in the region. It's an entity that is appreciated by us. It's a regulator, Rafael Muentes Rojas. Thank you, Rafael, for being here. It's a pleasure to be here. We also have David Cox, the president of the Association of Telecommunications in the Caribbean. He is vital for the regulatory debate of digital in Latin America. We also have a dear friend, a woman that debates in the digital world. She thinks in the digital world, in digital society. She's wonderful in regulatory topics. She's a dear friend, Paola Bonilla, Commissioner of in Colombia. Thank you. We have another dear friend. We are really excited about how much she has grown. She can show her digital vision. She's a woman that has been fighting every day with her commitment to connectivity and digital transformation. Julissa Cruz, and the executive director of Indotel. Thank you. Thank you. It's an honor to be here. Martín Olmos. Welcome, Martín. He is a digital thinker from a ministry that is vital in Argentina. He is Undersecretary of Information Technology and Communications in Argentina. Martín Olmos, welcome. Thank you, Jorge. Greetings to everyone. We're going to be starting very quickly. And very quickly means a topic that concerns you a lot. You like to see what's coming today, but you like to look forward. What do you consider, Lucas, that are the challenges that we have to continue connecting, to continue moving in the region? And number two, to take a society with digital benefits that are tangible. Come on, Lucas. I was thinking about that. This is a very simple question, very straightforward. We're going to try to bring some ideas together. You probably heard about the agency, and I wanted to underscore this topic. Lately, even with the beginning of the pandemic, we have seen the need, the importance of the digital roads or digital highway, the importance of being connected. And it's important how to sustain, how to have some of the measures that have been taken in the different countries. It's important to align a high level at the presidential level. One of the positive things of the pandemic in the highest political level agenda, the public policies that come from that vision, from that importance that we give them, are not consistent. So we talk about the importance of connectivity, and in the past times, we have seen topics about renewal of very expensive licenses. We have seen also bidding to, to fund other things, to get funding, also with different things about connectivity, deployment. And I believe these are the most relevant items that I wanted to bring to the table. They see the industry, or one of the topics that we recently mentioned was the spectrum as a tool for innovation, as an inclusion tool, and not so much as a tool to collect funds. This is one of the most important things. Another important item, it's intelligent regulation. We can look at the regulatory simplification and also to get rid of obsolete regulations. And we're not looking about summarizing an amount of regulations in smaller areas, but change the concept, change the DNA. It doesn't matter that we have a lot of regulations, that maybe we had 50 or 100 pages or 3 or 4 books, to have the same regulations in less pages to summarize them. I don't think that's the case. With regulatory simplification, should be changes in the DNA, in the concept of the regulation. And this connected with all of this to eliminate the barriers to the different things, and to create a digital agenda in the long term, where we're talking about Mexico 5G. How do we create a digital agenda in the long term that would bring the demand of services for new technologies that triggers this deployment? And with this, I close, because yesterday we launched the global report of mobile adoption, and we can see that Latin America has been growing from the supply, from the infrastructure. 93% of Latin Americans, we have the coverage of mobile broadband, but almost 50% do not use it, maybe because of lack of content, maybe because of a lack of other digital accessibility in the devices, and long-term digital agenda that also promotes the digital abilities to look at the demand. And with this, I'm going to close my first intervention, Jorge. Thank you, Lucas. We can see that it has a very complex agenda, and I'm going to move with you, David. David, the pandemic made it visible for the opportunity to connect the citizens and the benefits of the internet and the information technologies to enable the basic rights, and also to reactivate the economy. In the case of the Caribbean, the needs are more complex, and we need to transport the infrastructure. It's not the same to connect the continent than connect the Caribbean. And we can see the deployment of infrastructures. All of this is different. The challenges that present right now, the infrastructure, the connectivity in the Caribbean when we are reactivating the economy.
Yes. First of all, let me say what an honor it is to be invited to this panel, and to thank the organizers and Huawei for the invitation. It is also a real pleasure to be on a panel with such experts in your areas, and I am very, very honored. The question you ask is so fundamental, so profound. It goes to the very heart of the problem, the very heart of the challenge. And you are correct. I don't mean to speak for Latin America, but the Caribbean and the challenges in the Caribbean, while we share much in common with Latin America, some of the challenges, at least in the project of digitization, are perhaps more acute, more profound, or different. First of all, the Caribbean, as you know, is largely made up of a number of different countries with very small populations. By and large, there are some that are larger than others, but there are many countries with small populations. The cost of investing and building out networks in these countries is relatively high in comparison to, say, building out a network in a place like Panama or Chile or Costa Rica or some parts of Latin America, where there is critical mass populations and where an operator can spread out those costs, although you have more people to cover and you have a greater geography to cover than many countries in the Caribbean. The fact is it is also a larger market. So your comment about the impact of the pandemic was so true. The rates of penetration for fixed services in the Caribbean remains too low. In contrast, penetration rates for mobile services is very high. In some countries, we have over 100% penetration of mobile services, of mobile subscribers. But of course, the costs for a user of using mobile broadband services versus using a fixed service, which is unlimited, which is not metered in the way that mobile services are metered, is very different. And the pandemic exposed the fact that there are too many communities in the Caribbean which remain unconnected. But here is the problem. In some of those communities where people are unconnected, many people do not see the value of having a broadband connection in their homes. They don't see the value of having a connection. That is until the pandemic. And it is only when the pandemic became a reality for most of us could some of these communities recognize that it was absolutely necessary for their businesses, for them to conduct their daily lives, for their education, for them to have a connection, a connection or a fixed line connection. There is that problem. Then there is the problem of affordability. How do we solve as operators this problem of affordability? We have high levels of poverty. We have rural communities which are underserved, and extending infrastructure into these communities is expensive because the number of people in those communities is very small. The relative cost of the investment to extend into those communities is very high. And this is the challenge which I know that operators in Latin America face this challenge, operators all over the world, but it is especially acute in the Caribbean. This is the challenge that we now face. How then to overcome this issue, this challenge of high costs to build out the network when the rate of return is so low that it makes it uneconomical? And I think what we have had to do as operators is we have had to take stock and to reflect that in addition to our mission as companies to connect people, we also have to recognize our role in development and our role in the course of the pandemic. So we are investing, despite the fact that it is expensive, despite the fact that the economic returns in some areas is not sufficient to cover the cost, we continue to invest. We are trying to connect as many people as possible as quickly as we can. And then in addition to that initiative, we are working hard to partner with governments all over the Caribbean in order to try to understand what are some of the policies from a regulatory point of view, from a tax and a fiscal point of view, that can help reduce the burden. And that partnership, and I will end on this point, that partnership with government, private sector, is critical to succeeding in getting more people connected and in supercharging the project of digitization. It is the most important thing that we can do as operators and the public sector when we talk about this process of digitization. It is crucially important. I will pause here, but I look forward to the questions that you have later. And just to say that, of course, the regulatory policies are critical to helping us understand this partnership and succeeding at this investment. So thank you again, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, David. A country that is always very attractive in terms of talking about regulation and digital policies. I believe it is the sexiest in terms of digital policies, and that is Colombia, because Colombia has a great capability to call upon people and debate on digital public policies. Let's remember that Colombia began this digital expansion about 10 years ago, and today we have amongst ourselves one of the most succinct people in terms of digital policies. That is Paola Bonilla. She's a woman who has worked a whole lot from planning everything related to public policies that are digital nature. And now Colombia has experimented in regulation in an exceptional manner. So tell us a little bit of how you have incorporated this thing that you call regulatory sandbox and how it you see the ever-changing world of regulation, how you tackle it directly. Thank you, and I want to say hello to my fellow panelists. Well, here in Colombia, we have what we call the first regulatory sandbox in terms of digital policies. We have had the participation of every single network provider, as well as a broadcasting company, from communal small companies to big broadcasters around the world. We include even the postal service, and we created projects that are related to products, to services, to solutions that were experimented through a new scheme. So this mechanism is new, it is alternative for regulation, and it guarantees that regulation at large can truly respond to the changes and conditions that are economic and technical in nature and that come from the technological advancements that we are experiencing. And of course, the CNC has published a new resolution in 2020 in which we defined the new directions and rules for this sandbox regulation in Colombia. And in this sense, I want to tell you that in 2020, we developed a series of guidelines to apply these new projects. And the objective was to provide training to the entirety of the sector. We actually did about 18 workshops, and we created a questionnaire for evaluation and assessment. This is an innovative topic that was implemented for the very first time. So it was necessary to train the entirety of the industry and the people who are part of it. This is a proposal for the future that allows the implementation of this alternative mechanism that comes hand in hand with traditional regulation. And with this, we want to materialize projects that have a social impact. And in this year, in 2021, we developed a few activities, some of them related to the application of the regulation sandbox, in which we created several conversations, we engaged in conversations, we created mechanisms like assessment to microsites and everything that was alternative to the industry. We also created activities that had to do with the application phase. And this is where we empowered the new capabilities in order to create a document to call upon experts and everything that had to do with creating the strategy, especially for assessment and every type of proposal that would come in our way. And the last phase was that of assessment of evaluation, in which we wanted to see the proposals, study them. We supported people with counselorship programs, and we provided even everything that had to do with the judicial world. And we went to an extra phase which was experimentation. And in this, we wanted to see those indicators of success, of risk, those mechanisms of surveillance and monitoring, and to create protocols that will allow us to give a follow-up. And this is important to mention because of the call that we did to the people had 23 proposals from the communications sector and from the mail sector even, and television sector. And from those, we accepted 10 proposals. And once we corroborated all the data, then we went to the assessment and evaluation of the new programs. And we actually had the support from the National University of Colombia, in which we unified all the criteria of selection that we established in official regulation that gave us as a result the admission of 3 final projects that are still now in the experimentation phase. These projects have to do, the first one with that comes from Telecommunications Colombia, which is a broadcasting company that deals specifically with the access to rural areas through 4G technology, in which we want to implement set technology and in the future 5G. And then we have another one that's called Service Operation Center Technologies, which involves the implementation of a platform to make sure that they have real engagement in the consumption of our services. And the last one is by Operadora Colombia Móvil, which entail the creation of an intelligent contract in which we would create better opportunities for hiring services to citizenship at large, and creating contracts that are easier to access and easier to understand. So through these innovations, we created an overarching project that gave us the most important aspect of each and every single one of them. One of those points was, for instance, rural connectivity, and of course, improving user experiences and improving contractual services, hiring new services. So this is the area in which we find ourselves. We are still in the experimentation phase. Once the said phase is over, we will analyze the results from the projects and we will determine if they can be applied. We update our regulation and then implement them. Thank you, Paola, for your intervention. One of the most important personalities within the sector is Julissa Cruz, who has quite the trajectory and career. And we are so happy to have her here with us. So you started to work very quickly on proposing a vision and a work plan and you provided a lot of visibility to it. So please tell us, now that we're evaluating every single action that we're going to take towards the future to deploy more digital transformation, tell us within this context about your agenda, everything that you're going to do for economic activation or reactivation, as it were. Well, first off, it is quite the honor for me to be part of this panel with people that I truly admire and love, and people I have learned from so much, especially in terms of regulation, because we're facing these challenges together, these common challenges. We assume the executive direction of Infotel, which is during the pandemic, which is one of the main companies, telecommunication companies here in the country. At the time, we didn't even have the vaccines in sight yet. So we needed to truly act quickly to make sure that connectivity conditions in the Dominican Republic would improve. And although they weren't that bad in terms of coverage, there were a few gaps that we were having in terms of infrastructure and in covering the needs of the population to truly connect to platforms that allowed them to engage in work from home, in education from home, and other demand for several services that telecommunication giants can offer. So in very little time, the president of the Dominican Republic issued a decree in which access to information and internet would be a basic need, a basic fundamental right of every single citizen. So this allowed us through this decree, this included different forms of actions that we, the Communications Secretariat, we needed to implement. We need to free up, for instance, 700 spectrum, and we tendered the 3.5 and 700 megahertz spectra. And we did this in record time. In February of this year, we actually launched the tendering process, and next month we will adjudicate responsibilities. So we believe that 5G deployment will actually become a reality by the end of this year. And the users will be able to make use of said networks and feel the benefits that they bring about. We also started the process of implementing digital television. Digital television is something that has been talked about in the Dominican Republic since 2010. We were postponing it for so long, but by presidential decree, we can no longer afford that. So by September 30 of next year, it will be fully operational, and we are advancing towards that. And in record time, we have managed to close a deal with the Inter-American Bank of Development to improve optic fiber infrastructure in the Dominican Republic. It was quite a shock to see the challenges that we are facing in every state to improve this connectivity and digital transformation issues. And these problems have to do with resources. It is the resources at the heart of it all. So now when the health sector is requiring so much money and education as well, the states understand the need of improving the connectivity issues. And there are areas that, naturally speaking, never will the private sector reach. So it is important to have state investment in these areas. And this is exactly why, through implementing these deployments, and we are discussing in the National Congress, we believe that in the next few months, we will be able to launch new deployment projects that reach every single household, especially in those municipalities and locales that do not have it, but with important incentives in the face of local governments. That is, only those local governments that allow and facilitate and provide these permits for deployment, those will be the first beneficiaries of this endeavor. So everything is linked up in a way of concatenation of actions in order to achieve these goals and defeat these obstacles, if you will. And another important thing to mention is that regulation has to be more efficient now than ever before. And in order to do that, we need to have legal framework that are modern, that allow us to generate an environment for investment, for correct and proper regulation, etc. So we have started a whole process of consultation amongst all sectors to ensure that in a joint effort, we can create a project of telecommunications and connectivity law or act. We are focusing, of course, in telecommunications, but we need an act that is macro in scope, that allows us to create a digital ecosystem and then a digital economy that is all encompassing. So this is yet another project that goes hand in hand with the others. We are quite advanced. We have the expectation that by the end of the year, we will be able to introduce to the president the document that needs to be presented in turn to the deputy of chambers and to the Senate and then to Congress. Another important landmark that we have achieved, and this is something that is fresh out of the oven, if you will, is that we have signed a few tendering contracts for the main mobile companies in the Dominican Republic. And this is one of the prerequisites that we asked of them to access the spectrum that was liberated. And for one of these companies, they had an obligation of 20 years, and for the others as well, even to establish the best services possible, improvements and enhancements, not only in the content of the contract, but also in regulation in and of itself, especially for the follow-up of investments, so that these investments can actually go not only to make sure that the company grows, but to maximize the benefits possible. So I believe that with this, I have given you a broad scope of what we're doing. And of course, we're tackling other things like skill building and connectivity with other states. The digital gaps, which are greater for us compared to other countries, and other actions to make sure that the Dominican market can generate skills. Can have a skill building component to it to make sure that our professionals become better. Thank you, Julissa. One of the most loved regulators in this environment, and then that has had quite the institutional impact, and a regulator that has unfortunately had to face this maelstrom of that's been happening is in Peru. That is Rafael Muente. He has been working in the telecommunication sectors for quite a while, so I believe this is one of the markets that has grown throughout the years in a very discreet manner, by the way, but they have fomented everything that has been positive and happening. They have a rather interesting approach to it, and they deployed radio bases all over the country. There's a competition in all operators to be part of the municipalities. Even there's a lot of competition, which is good. And they even become actually quite efficient at implementation, that they have made their services even cheaper. So there's a lot of things that Peru has been doing so well. So Rafael, please tell us what's on your mind, what you have done to make sure that you maintain these investments and to make sure that your regulation is so respected and well thought of. So what have you been doing throughout these years, Rafael? Tell us a little bit about that. Please turn on your mic. Thank you, Jorge. And special greetings to all the members of the panel. And of course, I want to thank the organizers for making sure that we were invited here. So to paint you a picture, as it were, Peru a few years ago made a few regulatory decisions that were destined at substantially improving skill building within the sector. And these decisions, without question, have borne fruit. And if we were to look into megabit per second affairs in fixed internet over the past 5 years, we have seen a reduction of over 93% in the value of megabyte per second. And therefore, megabyte and mobile services, we have seen a decrease of about 93%. And that, of course, is only based on creating a competitive environment that is quite challenging for all companies. That is because competition demands of companies to be the most efficient. And therefore, even with all of this, this has created a series of challenges that have been maximized or exacerbated during the pandemic. And this in hand with regulation. The pandemic has created a lot of conflict in a country like Peru, where there is a very large rural world in which we have a rather complex geography, because we have the Amazon forest and then the Andes in one part. So this provides quite a challenge to reach that very dispersed diaspora of population all over the country, because we have over 120,000 settlements that are very dispersed throughout the country. And the challenge that is actually very urgent is to provide broadband to these settlements. And as Julissa pointed out, because there's a coincidence amongst ourselves, is that the private sector cannot do that by themselves. We need a state that generates investment, and there are many challenges that we need to attend to in the short term. And I believe that there is a single minute in which a citizen of Peru has no access to broadband, they are losing opportunities to develop themselves, to crystallize personal projects, and to make of their lives something better. And this sense of urgency is something that we need to translate into a cultural perspective, a perspective of establishing values, which in our case have to do with excellency, with innovation as well. And innovation is a fundamental pillar that we need to introduce to this very complex process that requires act of urgency. And the agenda has to do with innovation in the end. In our ministry, we have created a series of products that try to empower the user so that through their own decisions, they can increase their skill bidding levels and tackle those service provider that provide the best services, and they even enter a form of ranking, that is in terms of quality of service, in troubleshooting, in claims solving issues, and even in the metropolitan areas and few provinces we create a ranking per quality. So this way it will allow users to make decisions that create more competitiveness, but without being deregulated, that is, of course. And on the other hand, we have had to accelerate the pace to a series of acts of agency, if you will, that use non-presential and digital media as a form of fiscalization, if you will, and the need to develop and to push forward as a form of catalyst for the industry to make better decisions, and of course to develop investment in a speedier fashion in terms of digital user attention. Actually, call centers have reduced their presence in terms of people because of the pandemic, and this implied that through the problems of connectivity and the changes in structuring the resources that went from the offices towards the hands of people in their homes, it created at first a lot of turmoil. And the companies had to make a few decisions so that they would bolster their infrastructure and their quality of services for households. And they were taking in it as a form of, which beforehand were just a secondary aspect, and now they became primary. So we at our ministry, public ministry, we created a few of additional regulation, which is called Chico Plan, to make it easier and more accessible to the people. It is now translated into a tool or a platform that allows every user to compare the attributes with a lot of flexibility and compare, a form of benchmark. Checa Tu Plan was awarded by the telecommunications professionals all over the world, and it was qualified as the best product around the world in terms of access to knowledge of services. And through that, we have created better services and contracts that are friendlier to the user. Just not having boilerplate information in a 2-page long contract that would be so inadmissible. No, we want our users to make use of it, so in a better fashion, and creating an interaction between the user and the operator that is integrally even digital and better through several tools that, maybe, for instance, normal service, like let's say you want to cancel a service or you want to buy a new one, do that in a digital fashion that makes it easier, user friendly, and make it easier also for operators themselves, but also making sure that we save money in the long term, especially for system maintenance. They won't have the need to have actual people working in there, but that will create in turn a better benefits for the users, because we will no longer have this very tedious situation of going to a line and waiting there to get client services. So to become even more efficient and to generate incentives for this efficiency that needs to be taken to the user, this is what makes us work together. We have indeed creating skill building processes, and there's still a long way to go. There's much to cover yet, especially in the rural world. And this is exactly where the state needs to invest and follow suit to everything that has been done. But skill building in and of itself is not the end. It's just a means to an end, because we're providing public services. The state is the holder of the rights to those services, and therefore the raison d'être of the regulator and providers is the user. And through this perspective, we have created perspective, but without losing vision that this skill building process must provide a better satisfaction to the citizen, to the user at large. Thank you, Rafael. Very interesting reflection of what we have done. Competition is not the objective. It is just a tool to make sure that the user has the best experience. Now we have heard from the regulators, and it is time to hear from the actual practice, the focus of public policy. And let's say that is something that is usually not talked about, but Argentina has this second 4G network most robust in the world, actually. So Argentina has advanced in strides in terms of advancing their infrastructure, especially in accessing the 4G technology, providing users with a robust network. And due to the educational level of Argentina, it sounds quite demanding even, because they demand a lot of data, and they have the education to demand, to meet those demands. So in the end, actually, in terms of comparison, the Argentinian user will consume up to 200% more data than the average Latin American user. So when it comes to public policies in Argentina and reactivation of the economy and everything that has to do with investment and expanding the network, what is it what we can do from the political aspect to do together?
Thank you, Jorge. First of all, I want to thank the organizers, the sponsors, for the opportunity to presenting in this wonderful panel with such important speakers. With respect to the pandemic, there's a common reality to all the countries, which was something that really accelerated digitization of all the processes. The ones about the daily life of everyone, access to information, entertainment, also basic services, health, education, work, In this sense, we have tried to walk with this process with regulatory policies, public investment. Just to mention briefly, Conectar, which is a plan that has the basis of public investment in connectivity, expansion of fiber optics network. You were just referring to the extension of 4G. Our SAT, this is very important in this sense. We have different mobile operators that use our SAT as a backbone. That is a network in Argentina that is part of the reality of many countries in the regions. We have Rafael. This is a huge country with the population that is distributed not evenly in small metropolitan areas, also with a diversity of geographic areas that are very difficult to have access. And this is an additional challenge with respect to the development of infrastructure, the state, the public sector, that is basic. We have worked in strengthening the plans for expansion and the growth of fiber optics, the update of the networks in order to manage more traffic and also to get to more places, basic to small places. And we have many co-ops and SMEs and the places where it's feasible to provide the service, because our SAT arrives with the network, and it's just necessary to look at this deeper, because right now we have 2,100 towns, and in this investment plan that I mentioned, we have set the objective for the next couple of years to get 160 more towns, and this is a very ambitious plan. We are working in taking over the development of satellite networks in our country. And for us, this is a very important topic, because satellite services are basic because of the features that I mentioned about the geographic area and density to provide the service in these areas, and also because there's satellite technologies in the country. And this is going to help us improve the third satellite that is under construction here by INVAP, an Argentinian company that provides high capacity services and sends all moving forward in the same way, strengthening digital TV services with the idea of get to analog and digital, getting digital dividends that are going to be important in order to use that spectrum in other services as needed from the regulatory framework. We have really moved forward in infrastructure, something that is providing us with positive results that can be seen already. We can see it with different operators. We can see the change in attitude in their policy as of the approval of the rules. These are people that really respect free will, the agreement among the different parties, because it brings different instances in the regulator when that agreement is not on the table, where the different parties are not considered. We have also added the regulations of telecommunications in properties, in real properties. It replaces the regulations from the year 2000 that was not up to date. It was only considering fixed phone lines or landlines. And also with the internal networks to be neutral and to have more competition, that we don't have disagreements between exclusivity and when there's a real estate development with the neighbors from the different places and with the single operator without a situation about competition. Also, we have set or place for consulting the updating of the radioelectric framework, and this is very, very important from the operators. We are consulting about the introduction of innovative figures that have to do with secondary state, about sharing spectrum, and as general policy of the government in order to take the decision on these topics. And as mentioned before, we have gotten rid of everything about the retention, about exporting services that have been imposed in 2018. And we have approved the law of the economy of the knowledge with everything about the digital ecosystem. Among the activities that we have promoted, we have establishing data centers, everything that has to do with the Internet of Things, with the development of applications based in AI and other benefits that are very important with respect to taxes, to the earnings, taxes on different things. And all of this is between 70 and 80%. So this is a policy that is very important for the entire ecosystem. Just to mention a few things. Thank you, Martin. We are almost at the end. It's a shame because having all of you having this wonderful panel, I thought that we could take 2 or 3 questions, but we're going to take one last question, a minute and a half for everybody. So we're going to close with the following. Same question for everyone. What opportunities and what threats do we have in the coming months in the pandemic and decision making? Lucas, you have the floor. Okay, minute and a half. To go back on the right to demand in the past few years, the 5th generation of 5G is a reality, but 4G, it's still a lot of room to grow. Or, in our region, 93% of the people do not have 4G, or for some reason, there's a high percentage that do not have access to work and developing the digital skills, local content, relevant common use tools like e-government. We believe that what the digital government does is to scale up what digitization is and trying to close that demand gap. And financial inclusion tools, for example, last week, we worked with the communities in Paraguay. We saw changes that could threat the entire fintech ecosystem about moving things, and I believe that this is very relevant. Opportunities, I said that several times. In the 5th generation, that G is not one more G. It's a disruptive leap in a way that people do not only communicate, but also things, regulation of productive items. I think that we can see the different reports, the different traps, the productivity trap. And this is one where Latin America was immersed. And we believe that the adoption of 5th generation is a tool that we all can have to skip over this productivity trap. For this, we're going to have to look over the frameworks of public policy, regulations in order to promote innovation. And I think that we have a great opportunity, and hopefully we're going to be able to really use it. Threats and opportunities. David Cox, threats and opportunities.
I think the greatest threat we face is regulatory or government overreach as a result of panic about where the pandemic has left us. Governments are very concerned about getting people connected because in the age of the pandemic, clearly internet connectivity and a high-speed, good quality broadband connection could mean the difference between an economy continuing to function or someone's life, or large sections of the population continuing to be able to go to school online. So connectivity is more essential than ever, and the pandemic has exposed this. But governments could make the situation worse by attempting to intervene directly in the market or attempting to enact policies or encourage regulation to force operators to invest in a way that isn't sustainable. And regulators can make the situation worse through greater or more invasive regulation that is not pro-investment, that does not encourage a greater deal of, frankly, private capital being spent by operators to reach the customer. And if that private investment is threatened or undermined because regulation is too difficult, too onerous, too hard, and if government policy makes operating too expensive because of mandates, oppressive rules about network infrastructure, or just high level of taxation, it undermines, frankly, the overall goals that we all want, which is to see greater digitization, greater democratization of information, greater connectivity, and a transformation of all of our society. So that's the greatest threat. The opportunity, frankly, is for operators to just work harder and to get more people connected. And as more and more people connected, I think that it's just going to mean more success. Broadband is the essential service. Everything depends on broadband. Content, everything that's being consumed today by the consumer, almost everything is being consumed over broadband. So it is the fundamental business at the moment, and so there are opportunities. Lastly, I just want to say again, thanks to all of you for the opportunity to speak on such an incredible panel. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you so much. And Paola Bonilla now. Yes, there's no question that the pandemic made clear that all of these technologies make it clear that it is important for the technologies to develop. And as we face this, the main challenge or risk is connectivity in rural areas. The topic about taking connectivity to all the faraway rural areas that are dispersed with respect to make it difficult to bring it massive access to information technology and communications, taking into account this scenario. the pandemic has shown many opportunities. The first one is that at risks like digitization of the processes between users and operators, the topic about physical offices, all of this, it shows that this should be a trend that persists with time. Not that we forget because it was a challenge throughout the pandemic, but that it is part of the digital ecosystem. A great learning is how fast the expedition, the regulations throughout the pandemic, all the regulators in the region, we have to react very quickly as we face the changes demanded by the pandemic. This, how fast, situation about how fast this moves and is focused, is going to be looking at things like incorporating, on one hand, an evidence-based regulation, and also based in data and methodologies of impact, regardless of having quantitative, qualitative analysis that allow to create this type of interventions that the market needs, particularly in the use of data towards the inside and digital transformation of the regulator, not only using emerging technologies for the issuing the regulation, to put together the regulations with AI and other technologies, but also to the inside of the processes. Digital transformation of the regulator can summarize the challenges for the regulators in light of the learning opportunities. Thank you, Paola. Data and evidence, Julissa Cruz. Challenges and opportunities. You know that the pandemic brought the blessing along that brought us together and placed everything in public policy, and it really fast forwarded the development of land, the laws and everything to accelerate the deployment of 4G and also the entry of 5G. It takes us under this transition, and this definitely has a cross-sectional impact throughout everyday's daily life in the productive sectors in their countries. So for sure, the challenges is that we need to place before the market the resources, the necessary spectrum in order to take care the needs of connectivity, public investment in those places where the private sector naturally will never arrive. Private investment to improve the conditions of the networks that have already been deployed and to take it to those places where they can get the profitability that the companies so much need. And also to share infrastructure, because once they are deployed, we're going to make the resources to be useful for everyone and not to have overinvestment, and even more right now to make the investment be efficient and smart. From the states to get rid of bureaucratic work with the local governments that can understand this deployment need, that enable the deployment of infrastructure, the development of the e-government, that more and more the states can offer online services that add efficiency to the processes, to the productive processes. From the point of view of demand, we need to look the fiscal framework of the sector, of the different sectors, from the fees and tariffs to import devices. Some countries like ours, and that we're working and we're discussing with the central government in a gradual deployment. So implement the next fiscal reform and the development of digital skills. We don't do anything. We can't, we're going to get crazy. We want to guarantee coverage if people do not use it in a productive manner, if they don't use the technologies in a productive manner. This is a very important topic. The person that lives in rural areas that has access to technologies and doesn't use it for their human development And otherwise, this is not going to be worth it. And from the social policy, it's time to assess topics like focalized subsidies for those people that in the short to medium term are not going to be able to have access to the reality to the services and technologies. Thank you, Julissa. Thank you, Rafael Puente. A minute and a half. I could repeat what has been said because I believe that the countries have the same challenges in general. And I don't want to say the same thing because, yes, we agree in the needs to reach more people, connectivity, infrastructure for them. And of course, this is the entire surrounding that renews more efficiency and sustainability of the scheme of the regulatory model in our countries. With the pressure that we have, we're going to have more and better communication, and also to have the threats that somehow can be looking or breaking everything on the decision making. There are risks of political inherence and regulations that are not issued by the regulator. And with the regulatory framework, with the impact of cost, benefit, regulatory impact, in order to bring effects that are the opposite that what is expected. And this is something that we have been noticing and that is necessary for the private sector and the state through the regulatory organizations can reinforce and align in establishing a model that makes the effective progress to be sustainable, to reach more citizens in our countries. Beyond the challenges, beyond the situation that is so complex and that we have to assume, we have to take care of this with a sense of urgency. This continues to be something that we have to look into. Thank you, Rafael. Martín Olmos, you're closing. I don't want to repeat what has been said. And the opportunities are huge for this leap in productivity. And this is very difficult. With respect to threats, also the same. The main threat is that we currently have, if we can't connect, if we can't achieve universal access, we're going to continue having economy that are in two speeds. In a sector that is modern, digitization, high productivity, and another sector that with this infrastructure services, when it's not part of the services, it cannot have that improvement in the connectivity and productivity. And of course, it's not just about the service coverage, also to be able to have access to digital skills, joining the challenges like cybersecurity, using more people, more intensive, more time. In these technologies, of course, this increases risks and challenges in cybersecurity, and the debates throughout the world with respect to the safeguarding and the protection of personal data, the need of setting some ethical standards in the AI, these are the biggest, not so much threats, but challenges that we have before us. Thank you, everyone. This has been a wonderful panel. It's a shame not to have more time with you, but I'm going to be talking with the production team because they did not allow me with more time to talk to you. Paola Bonilla, a wonderful regulator, Julissa Cruz, Lucas, one of the leaders in the private and digital sector, David Cox, the main leader in the industry in the Caribbean. And we have also, all these regulators, everybody that have been talking in the Innovation Day today. Today, we're dedicated to the economic recovery in Latin America, but also the privilege to be able to enable the basic rights through the internet, through information technology and telecommunication services. Thank you. Thank you for your presentation with your dialogue. We're going to continue live, completely live, and we have Boston Consulting Group about digital economy with Hunter Williamson, Global VP of public topics in this area. You have the floor, Andrew.